I just want to welcome Brendan Duffey to us
you.
here at Earlund's at the NAMM show. What I wrote, when I posted, four Latin Grammy nominated.
Yeah, no win yet, but maybe one day. But you know, it's good to be in the batter's box.
Yeah, you will win.
If not, I'm pretty happy with those. It's not shabby at all.
But you have awards in film and advertising as well?
Yeah, for over a decade, around a decade, I owned a studio in São Paulo, Brazil called Norcal Studios. We worked a lot on film and advertising. So we won Professional of the Year with Global and a lot of other film awards for soundtracks. I can't remember them all, but the facility worked on anything from bands to mixing, mastering, advertisement, jingles, feature film, anything we could do with audio we were doing.
That's amazing. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, so nowadays I sold that facility. I have a one-room facility or a mastering room in Davis, California. And I do a little bit of mixing out of there and mostly mastering. And I still produce some bands and work with local artists and international artists.
What kind of artists?
For mastering, I've done people like Daniela Mercury, who's an Axé artist from Brazil. I'm currently working with Amigos 20 Anos, which is a lot of the old country musicians from Brazil got together in a stadium with 100,000 people and sung all their I think over 40 songs. It's a 3-hour concert. I'm developing some bands in Sacramento, one called Gray Bar Hotel and another called, I can't think of the name, Steric. But mostly I'm focused on mastering. And I teach at American River College as a professor. So
and then you're using Ehrlund microphones.
Yes, quite a bit. In fact, last week I did an acoustic guitar session for the Steric project, and we used the Earlunds. I ended up using the NAMM for both vocals and some of the acoustic instruments because you can stick them really close to the source, very minimal proximity effect, really clean tone and massive frequency range. So they got a lot of low end that I don't get in all my microphones. And especially getting that close to the source, a lot of the time you get too much of proximity effect, too much buildup in the low end, which is something that doesn't happen in the Earlunds because it diffuses the signal. It's unable to go around. So you get it's a microphone that sounds unlike all the other microphones I have. Not in the fact that it has more high end or low end or more distortion. It actually reacts to source differently depending on where you are, and it makes you rethink how you're going to microphone stuff. And it took me a while to get used to it, but once I did, I ended up using the microphone more and more and more. And my students just found that they loved them because they just sounded really good on almost all the sources they put them on. And these are people with relatively low, they don't have that much contact with microphones, but they can tell when something is sounding really good in comparison with the others, and the Earlunds were coming up on top a lot. So,
do you think it's hard to use them, students?
I think every microphone has a learning curve.
Yeah.
But most microphones, the center tap, side tap, round, diaphragm, microphone, circular, they all have similar manners in which they pick up and react to source material. So if you get a SM57, a SM58, a SM7, any of those dynamic microphones, everything you do similarly with them will have a similar reaction. The Earlund doesn't do that. It picks up the sound differently for me. It has a lot to do with proximity to the source, and a lot of the artifacts that come with normal microphones don't occur in the Earlund. So I think it's an interesting tool to use because you've got an extra option. and not many microphones can offer that.
Well, I want to know a little bit more about you. You
Okay.
said you lived in Brazil for 20 years.
Yes,
How did you end up in Brazil?
I fell in love with a Brazilian woman named Ana Claudia. When I was in college at Chico State, I met a business major. And
So you met here in...
yes, in Chico State in California, Northern California. And a couple months later, I traveled to Brazil with her to go meet her parents. I eventually moved to Canada right after I graduated to work as an engineer at a work study in the Camp Banff Center. And when my wife found out it was minus 50 in February, she decided that I needed to move to Brazil, and we had already talked about it. So I packed up my toothbrush and flew down south and spent almost 12 years of my life in Brazil. My 2 kids were born there, and when I arrived there, I spent 6 months trying to learn the language. Eventually gave up on that, and I got a job. Online, I met a guy named Lampadinha. I sent him my resume, and a month later I went and did an interview with him and ended up working at a place called Midas Music, Midas Studios, which is one of the biggest record producers in Brazilian history for rock. A guy named Rick Bonagio owned. So I was lucky. I started working with all the big rock and pop bands from Brazil right off the bat. Sort of got in the mix exactly where I wanted to be.
Well, it's the best just to get in there
Yeah,
and start
and
with
it helped me learn Portuguese. It taught me how the record making industry works in Brazil, which is not anything like the way records are made here. It's much quicker. The budgets were already lower. That hadn't occurred yet here. And the social aspect had changed quite a bit. In American studios, you're to be seen and not heard, and no opinions. In Brazil, you have to say hello to everybody. It's a much different environment. And after 2.5 years, I figured out that I wasn't going to grow there. So my wife had the idea of opening a recording studio. We were initially going to do a small one, and then we found this gigantic building. And
You just found it.
we bought it, and for a better part of 10 years, we made a very good name for ourselves in the rock and pop industry. And right before we sold the studio in 2015 or 2014, we had one of the best-selling rock albums in the last 15 years. My business partner had created a band in the studio at night, and then ended up going on TV and winning this big major show and becoming this gigantic band. So we had a really prolific last year. I moved back to the United States, brought a lot of my equipment, did a purpose-built room by a great guy named John Brandt, and started mastering records and mixing records, focused mostly on mastering and production now, and started working with a lot of great artists like Lulu Santos, Paulo Fernandes, Mestrinho, where was my last Grammy nomination, and there's so many, because you work with 3 or 4 artists a day. So, but it's been really good. I'm happy. It's a different environment.
Yeah, if you compare to what you did in Brazil and then do it here.
Talking about a 15-year in a couple of minutes. But over the years, I've owned a lot of equipment. I've owned a lot of different microphones, different compressors, different EQs, and it's very rare that I get something that really shocks me or makes me think. And I think equipment like that is good because you get something that challenges you. And when I first got the Earlean microphone, I have to admit, it wasn't that I wasn't impressed, I was confused because the microphone didn't react in the way that I was thinking it would. So there was a added level of frustration. And then the sort of small engineering mind that I have, figured out what was occurring and changed the way I thought and applied the microphone to signals. So, And I discovered that on rooms and on acoustic instruments for backing vocals, the microphone worked beautifully and got exactly the results I wanted. There was a learning curve, but it's something that I think when equipment challenges, you become a better engineer. And not one microphone's going to be great for everything, but it's definitely a microphone that's very, very different.
Well, that's awesome. We're just so happy that you like the Ehrlund microphones.
And it's something, it's strange for a client to be in front. It's you don't always buy equipment just for the fact of the purpose. It's a utility. It's supposed to do this. There is the placebo effect where clients see something new and different and they want to try it, and they want to experiment with it. And the fact that there's a triangular diaphragm, the mic looks so much different to people. People want to use it. They get excited. And I think that's part of the recording environment. It's not just the equipment you have, but some of the time how people feel when they're performing on your equipment. And when something is so different, they may not understand it, but I think it's exciting for people to work on something new. It adds, whether it's going to change anything for them or not, sonically is one thing, but there is the placebo effect, and it's definitely interesting to have a microphone that's different in the collection.
I hope more people will see the better effect of the microphones, of course, in the future.
I can definitely see these microphones growing or being added to a lot of different mic collections. Even when at the time I left it at the college, the students weren't quite sure what to make of it at the beginning, but within 2 or 3 sessions they had found its utility and were using it the same way at the same time, getting great results. So yeah, it worked. I think mission accomplished on that one. But it's just one more creative tool, and I think it's different and interesting. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you want to come and talk about you and Ehrlund's microphones. But what's your plans for the future now?
To keep on doing what I'm doing. I don't have any necessarily any big plans right now. It's just keep on producing music, work with some local and international artists. I do a lot of work in Japan too, with a group called Hyperbackers. And I ended up doing a record this summer with Steve Boffman and Alex Lehner, who both are users of Earlean too. But it's just artist development, just working with new artists and making music, and growing my mastering career, and working with more artists and making more music. Pretty simple. What I've been trying to do for the last 20 years.
Sounds wonderful. It sounds great.
Yeah.
It really does. Well, you want to talk a little more? Or you...
I don't know. If there are any more questions?
Not like that, but...
Yeah, I don't...
We got a lot. Yeah, I'm so glad that you wanted to sit and talk about you and Ehrlund. I'm impressed about your work. I am.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Brendan Duffey. I'm a mixing and mastering engineer and producer, and I use Ehrlund mics and I have great results. You should go check them out. You will not be disappointed.